Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our April webinar. We've got a fantastic speaker with us this morning, Abrie Snyman, who's going to introduce himself and get talking. This is going to be a bit of a unique webinar in that we will be able to hear Abrie, but he won't be able to hear us. So if you do have any questions, please pop it in the chat function. Alternatively, raise your hand and I'll get Abrie on the telephone and we'll do, like Puna said, a remote attendance or a hybrid type meeting. Please excuse the dark background on my side. I'm currently experiencing load shedding and recently painted my wall nice and dark, and unfortunately it's not helping with the light reflection today at all. I've got a bit of a glare. For those of you that are not yet subscribed to our newsletter, please do follow the link that Nicole is going to pop into the chat function and then sign up for the newsletter. The links to all of our webinars are on that newsletter. So I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of thumbs up because I need to show Abrie when he can start talking and that I can still hear him. So over to Abrie.
Okay, so Linda, can you hear me? Because I can now hear you.
Oh, perfect. Fantastic.
I can hear you.
There we
go.
Yes.
Good things happen. I did nothing from my side. I don't think you did anything. So yes, but it works out perfectly. Thank you for the invitation again. And I'm presenting from my cell phone as well, because at the office we have load shedding as well. And the generators are just making it totally impossible there. So yes, I did practice a bit on the phone. So yeah, let's get going.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Abrie.
It's a big pleasure. Okay, today we decided we're not going to do a presentation, but we're going to rather have like a type of discussion on the subject as we advertised it. As you know, I'm a town planner and Multiprof property intelligence specialized in the architecture and town planning combined with a sectional title. And that's quite unique. And we find that quite a bit of the issues that we have in complexes that is due as far as additions and alterations and parking is concerned have to do with a lack of understanding of the background of a complex, where it comes from. And so today, I think we want to start off with the pre-sectional title phase of a complex, because once a sectional title is developed, it is developed on top of a set of rules and regulation, town planning issues, and servitudes and stuff that have been there all the time, and it is applicable to all properties, not only sectional title. So let's start where the earth that the complex is built on come from. And of course, at some stage, it was a farm. There was wild game roaming on it, and over a period of time, there was a need to establish urban and complexes there, and a town planner applied to the local authority for a township establishment. And in the process of township establishment, a certain zoning was attached to that property. You get different zonings, and zoning just mean what type of activities you can have on the property and how much of those activities you can have. Now, typically, a residential complex will... Can you still hear me?
Yes, apologies.
Sorry, I lost. Can you still hear me?
Yes, Abrie. Yeah.
Why?
Yes.
Okay, can you still hear me? It went blank on this side. Okay. Yeah. So when you have a township establishment, the zoning is attached to it, and the property where the residential complex is developed would have a zoning typically of residential 2 or group housing. And that just means that you can have more than one dwelling erected on it. In the zoning certificate that is important to obtain for your complex, it would state the density. Now, that can be anything from 10 units per hectare to 50, 60, 200 units per hectare, and that will determine the amount of units that you can develop. So when a developer will approach us to design a complex, we first see how many units we can develop. Of course, if the site is a hectare in size and the zoning is 30 units per hectare, we can develop 30 units, and we will obviously try to do as many of the units as possible and still make it practical. A typical issue that comes up is later on when the complex is already built and there is, let's say, ablution facilities or a guardhouse developed, and the trustees then decide, oh, well, we don't need this anymore, so let's convert it in another unit. Of course, that would be contrary to the zoning, and therefore, once it's done, and you need to legalize it, it will take a new rezoning application to increase the density. And therefore, it's important to, before any changes or alterations is done by the trustees or by owners, that you need to take notice of the existing zoning certificate. Now, the typical issues in the zoning certificate, as we said, first is the amount of units that you're allowed. Secondly, the biggest one in normal complexes would be coverage. Now, coverage would relate to the amount of roofed area in the complex. Typically, that would be 30% or 40%. And the problem comes in that the developer will try to develop as much of that coverage as possible. And typically, let's say in a 30% coverage complex, he will develop 28% or 29%. And therefore, you have very little additional roofed areas that is allowed. Then the problem comes in that owner asks the trustees for permission to erect a carport, and they will say, yes, it's fine, go ahead. And of course, you will increase that 28 or 29% to close to 30%. And if the processes are followed, you'll be able to get the carport approved. And then the next owner will ask to put up a double carport, and immediately you will exceed the coverage. Now, typically in complexes that we deal with, trustees just give permission or gave permission, or owners just went ahead without any permission. So some of the complexes where we do audits, we find that they are already exceeding the coverage. Of course, the way that this is calculated can differ from council to council. So it's important that you find out from your specific council what the requirements is. In some cases, carports will be excluded, or certain type of structures is excluded. But it is important to know at any stage what the existing coverage is of existing structures. Another reason why it's important is because as trustees and a body corporate, you need to be able to share all the coverage between all the owners. And you cannot give permission to some people and then eventually you run out of coverage to give to other people, and therefore it needs to be shared equally. I've lost your face, Linda. I'm not sure if you're still there. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can still hear you. Still hear you.
Okay, there you are. Okay, sorry, you are back. Okay. It is important to understand that available coverage should be shared equally between all the owners, and therefore it is important to at any stage know what it is, the coverage, whenever we do audits, we calculate the amount of available coverage or the available coverage when the complex was built, and we advise the trustees that technically each person have an additional 20 square meters or 30 square meters to make sure that in 5 years' time, when the last owner want to put up a carport, he still have the available coverage to do that. We have cases where an individual owner added another 100 square meters to his unit, and then there's not additional coverage available to other owners. It is possible in some of the town planning schemes to apply for an additional 10% of coverage, but that is by decision of council on merit, and one cannot assume that they will allow that. So it is important to deal with coverage and understand the implications for the body corporate. Then the next one is floor area ratio, or floor space ratio as we call it, and that referred to the bulk of all buildings, and that only come into play when you have multi-story buildings, especially where there was balconies that was not included in the bulk before. The moment they are enclosed, they will become part of the bulk, and therefore, again, it is important to understand what the existing bulk that is allowed on the property is, and what the existing bulk is that have already been developed, because council can refuse to increase the floor area ratio, and that will leave the whole complex to be illegal, and then it becomes very difficult to say, okay, no, you were last to enclose your balcony, so you need to remove your balcony, because again, as we said, each owner should have his own percentage available to himself. And then I think the other very problematic one is parking. In each zoning certificate, there is minimum parking requirements, and that will include parking for the unit and visitors parking. So, and that would be dependent on various factors. It can be determined by the amount of inhabitable rooms in the unit, or it can just say per unit. It doesn't mean how big it is. So it's important to understand that the parking requirements is there and needs to be adhered to, and any changes, for instance, where garages are converted into living areas, immediately will affect the legality of the complex. And trustees often say, well, you know, he can park in front of his garage, there is space, or there is store parking available, not understanding that that is visitors parking. But the thought process should be, what would the situation be if each and every owner in the complex have the same privilege and get permission to enclose that? Because that can leave you short of 50 or 60 parking spaces, and that will definitely have a negative effect on the value of the property of each unit. When you go and look at the unit in a complex and there's cars all over, you will definitely not be prepared to pay the value that it would have if it was organized. So that's the other factor, is always to keep in mind that parking is a legal requirement, and a parking bay for council is not the same as you can park in front of your garage, or you park half in the garden and half on the paved area. For council, a legal parking space is 2.5 by 5 meters, and you need a backup area of 7 meters. You can't squeeze cars behind each other and think that that is legal parking. So one must distinguish between what the normal man say, oh, I can park my car there, or what council see as a legal parking space. So that is the factors in the town planning scheme that come from the township establishment that will be part of the property even before it is sectional title. Even if a developer decide to build a complex and just rent it out and keep it full title, all of those requirements is still applicable. Then there's issues like servitudes, for instance. Typically, the municipal services in a complex is protected by servitudes, and the servitude technically means an area where you're not allowed to build, and that would normally be on one of the sides, or sometimes we find that it runs right in the middle of the complex, and without knowing if there's any servitudes applicable, or if there are any restrictions, including stuff like building lines, street boundary building lines, or back and side building lines, it's not possible for trustees to give permission for anybody to do any addition. Now, the typical problem structures as far as servitudes is concerned is very often lapas, because lapas are often built at the back of a unit against the existing wall, and the problem with the servitude is that it is not marked by red paint on the ground. You cannot see where a servitude runs, except if you get the legal documentation, and that will be the title deed and the SG diagram, surveyor general diagram. You will not know that there is a lapa, or that there is a servitude. And therefore, often when we do audits, we unfortunately have to inform owners that those structures will have to be removed. And of course, they're very upset because they believe that they got permission from the trustees, and that trustee permission is good enough. On that point, I think one of the important things always to remember from the managing agent and the trustee side is that any permission that is given virtually have no value on its own if it does not refer to all the other rules and regulations that needs to be adhered to. And therefore, we always recommend that any permission given by trustees or via the managing agent should read something like, trustees have in principle no objection to this application on condition that all town planning scheme, all national building regulations, and all sectional title rules and regulations are adhered to. That will immediately put the responsibility on the owner that wants to do the alteration to understand that he needs to go through the processes of getting permission from the body corporate, from the owners, if it's going to take up any of the common property. He needs to submit a building plan. He needs to submit a site development plan if it is applicable. And he needs to make the alterations and the changes to the sectional title plans if that's a requirement. And he needs to get the certificate of occupancy to make it legal. And if those processes are not followed, the approval of the trustees is null and void. So I think that's about the most important thing that we can share. It will solve a lot of the problems that we sit with at this stage in complexes, purely because owners acted on the approval of the trustees. that with the best of their knowledge had the ability and the right to give those permissions, but of course you can never give permission for somebody not to follow the rules and the regulations. So that is in the bigger picture. That is the rules and regulations that is applicable on the property even before the sectional title is erected and developed. And then, of course, all the sectional title issues gets added to it. Common property, exclusive use areas, and of course, one needs to then adhere to all of those rules and regulations as well. Understand that you only own the inside of your section, and that anything that is going to be added will affect not only coverage or the floor area ratio, can even affect the parking, but it would also affect all the typical sectional title issues that that most of us is very aware of. So the important thing is at all time to know what the existing legal status is of your complex. And we find that after 40 years, there's so many changes that have been done that we have that the owners and the trustees have no idea what the existing situation is, what was original, what was added, what is the existing coverage, floor area ratio, parking requirements, is the parking requirements adhered to, and therefore we recommend that a complex before new permissions are given, undertake an investigation to determine how much coverage is still available, how many of the units is legal, and in our experience, in a complex of 40 years or 50 years old, you are very fortunate if you find that 20% of the units still comply to their original approved building plans and the sectional title plans. So technically what we do when we do an investigation like that is we obtain building plans, and only a building plan that have a stamp from council as approved can be used. We often also find that the trustees or owner will present us with a copy of a plan, thinking that it was approved, and then there would be no stamps on it, or there may be a stamp on that says submitted, and that also means nothing. So we can only deal with approved plans that is legal, that have been approved by council, and then we get copies of the latest sectional title plans, and we physically go out and we survey or measure each unit, and we compare those three with each other, and we give the body corporate a report per unit of stating what is legal, what's not legal. Do we need certain new building plans? Do we need to add to the square meterage for PQ purposes? And it's often a process that will take a few years to finalize, but without knowing the legal status of your complex at this stage, it is very difficult to know what next steps to be followed. And as we said, in the long run, it's important to accommodate all owners, give all owners the same opportunity for additions and alterations, and make sure that all structures is legal. Important from insurance side, it is also obviously critical that all structures is insured, and we often find that for insurance purposes, the companies only look at the existing site the existing sectional title plans, and they use those square meterages. And of course, that means that the complex will be underinsured, and especially where you have issues with illegal lapas and structures that is erected, for instance, carports that is erected in a way where you prevent the fire department to get a fire truck to all areas.
I think we've just lost Abrie there for a second. Mike, while Abrie's stuck, would you mind just commenting on the insurance aspect for us?
Yes.
Oh, Abrie, do we have you again?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to interrupt you there for a second. We've got Mike Addison on the line.
Fantastic.
Yeah, insurance specialist over here. And I thought while you were talking about insurance, I was going to ask him just to interrupt for a second and chat about insurance. Mike, are you online?
Yes, very much so.
There we go.
Hi, Mike.
Don't mind.
Hi, Abrie. We'll see you soon.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I concur with everything that Abrie is saying there. When we have a large storm or something and something comes down that's not shown on the sectional plan, it is often problematic, especially extensions and so on. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Mike. Sorry, Abrie, for interrupting you there. Back to you.
No, that I'm glad that there's a real specialist in that area, because we often find it difficult to convey this message to trustees, to say that, you know, it's not only a nice to have, you know, often people want to protect everything that's there. And the biggest problem, I think, is trustees themselves. My gut feel is that often people become a trustee to approve their own additions and extensions, and therefore they are reluctant when it needs to be legalized, because obviously there's cost involved. And as we said before, sometimes it just can never be legalized if it's built in servitude areas, or if it would obstruct the flow of traffic. It can never be approved, and council will not approve it. And then obviously it is not that easy to tell owners, listen, this needs to be demolished. And it is still problematic where owners refuse to act on the instructions of the body corporate or the trustees. And we always try to be as gentle as possible, but at some stage, you know, people just needs to be forced to do that. And not that we recommend that, but one of the ways is to try and get the council involved, ask the building inspector to come and inspect the complex, and then the council should deal with it via their rights that they have to enforce the national building regulations. So yeah, in short, I think that is the gist of it. We can carry on for much longer. I don't know if we have any questions, or if there's specific other aspects that we can go into more detail. Do you have any questions at this stage from your side, Linda?
Thank you so much, Abrie. I actually have noted 2 questions on my side, and I'm more than happy for Mike to come in again with some more nuggets of wisdom, as I know that he always has, if you'd like to. But the 2 things that I've got on my side, the 2, Nicole's and I just recently worked on a set of rules in a body corporate in Pretoria, your neck of the woods. And there was an interesting clause, and we were struggling with the English of it. And obviously, I think the English wasn't the problem. It was our lack of understanding of what you've just explained about the LAPA and the servitude. And Nicole now is going to have to remind me of the wording here, but I think it was something along the lines of, if a LAPA had to be erected on the exterior portion of the unit, in other words, over this like patio or terrace area, that it actually needed to be a certain space away from the unit. or a certain amount of space away from the unit. Nicole, am I completely confusing myself here? Can you recall that?
No, you're right. They said that owners are permitted to install a LARPer provided that it is at least 1 meter away from the section.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
okay.
we found that one quite interesting.
Okay. Like many others, that specific rule is basically a waste of time as far as I'm concerned. The national building regulations, if I'm not mistaken, state that it should be 4.5 meters from any existing structure or from the boundary wall. If not, you need to, of course, get permission from council, and typically council will ask for a rational fire design done by a fire consultant to ensure the safety of that structure. And that will include stuff like the treatment of the thatch and various other aspects like you need a parapet wall on the side if it is on the fence to prevent grass should you have a fire and it starts slipping down to slip into the neighbor's property or into the street or things like that. So there is various, it is already covered in the national building regulations. So the meter, I don't think is going to have any meaning in real life. Technically, it should just say all national building regulations should be adhered to, and that will cover specifically, things like LARPers. And of course, we haven't even mentioned Wendy houses.
Oh, that's a big
Wendy houses is also problematic. They are a fire hazard, and they also, council can insist on a rational fire design for a Wendy. Mike will know better, but typically the insurance clauses would say, we insure you for brick and tiles. So it never refers that you're insured for any thatch or any wooden structures. Mike, perhaps you must give us your input on that. I think that's a much bigger risk than trustees understand.
100%. Your 4.5 meters, I thought it was 4 meters, but 4.5 meters sounds even better. It's always problematic when we have to go out and look at a property and we find thatch LARPers everywhere and they're too near to the buildings, and then it's a nightmare to get stuff insured. So yeah, absolutely correct. It is problematic. Spread of fire is huge. With these things, fire risks, they love these things in Johannesburg where I am at the moment. Yeah, particularly on the West Rand, it seems to be LARPer land. But as far as Wendy houses go, absolutely, we've had experience where the Wendy house just catches fire. And very often, people are storing paint and their petrol for their lawnmowers and so forth in these Wendy houses. And the neighbor who's just, especially in Cape Town, I remember a table view incident. The property, the guys next door were having a nice little braai, and next thing the body corporate's Wendy house caught fire. So and got burnt to the ground. So yes, there are absolutely risks. That's all I have to say on that. Abrie, don't want to take any of your time.
Thank you, Mike. Abrie, thank you so much for that. So we're going to now refer that client to you, and we're going to go and delete that rule. And we obviously didn't know what we were talking about. So Nicole, I always tell the two Nicoles that work with me, we learn something new every single day. And the day that we don't learn something is the day to get out of the industry. And it's true. I can't tell you how many new things we learn all the time. And this is one of them. Thank you for sharing that with us. So when we deal with Wendy houses, which we do very often in our rules as well, we'll definitely come knocking on your door. But you can wait for this scheme to come and approach you soon. The other matter that we're recently dealing with is the change of use issue that you spoke about. And this is a very hot topic, and we very often get questions relating to the change of use. And interestingly, in a particular scheme, I generally don't like this approval in principle from the trustees. I either like them to approve something or not approve something, because there's always the danger of this in principle or subject to being subject to challenge. But I've recently undertaken a matter where an owner had to go door to door to get the written consent of all their fellow owners. I say door to door, not necessarily, email correspondence is fine. And I asked the trustees to give their approval in principle, knowing that the owners, when they dealt with the applicant owner, would ask the question of, what do the trustees think of this? If the trustees are happy with this application, we will give our vote in favor. So we thought, let's bypass the system and get the trustees' approval first and then go to the owners. And it was a bit of a challenge. It actually took 2 months to get the trustees' approval, but at least now we have it, that if the owner has to go through the rigmarole of getting every single person's written consent, they're not going to get stuck with the trustees not giving consent at the end of the day, which is also something that we very often deal with. So thank you for confirming that approval in principle subject to conditions or the members' approval. I like that one. I'll start using it if I may. Let's see, do we have any questions from those in attendance today or on the chat function? Just remember to raise your hand or unmute yourself. I don't see anything in the chat just yet.
I've got a question.
Sure.
And Kathleen Hart, I see you here today. So it's a question that maybe I'm asking on both of our behalves. Abrie, what is your take on people putting in mezzanine floors inside, say, a commercial section? You know, comments from your side. I mean, I know the answers from the insurance side, but from your side, how would you deal with a mezzanine floor that an owner has just been given permission to stick in there? And some of them are wooden, some of them are made of steel, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Mike, we also dealt with a similar case a year or two ago, and your first question should always be parking. Normally in these type of developments, you have a parking requirement of 1 parking space per 100 square meters. And typically those structures have 80% coverage. And therefore, when it's developed, let's say you have a 1,000 square meter property, you will provide 10 parking spaces to fit into that. Now, the moment you put in a mezzanine floor, and let's say you do only half of the building, you need an additional 5 parking spaces. And normally that cannot be provided on the property. So that is the starting point, is to check if you can fit it into your parking requirements. Second thing is, of course, that you need to be able to fit it into your floor area ratio. It will not affect the coverage, so that's not a problem. But you first need to see if you can comply to the town planning scheme as far as floor area ratio and parking is concerned. Then, of course, you need to comply to the national building regulations. And there you will, council will ask for an engineer certificate for the safety of it. And the fire department will ask for a fire certificate if it is something like wood, but that can normally be dealt with. But what cannot be dealt with is issues like parking, for instance.
Very interesting indeed. Sandra, I see that you've got your hand raised.
Hi, good morning. I've got a slightly different question, because what I'm actually seeing a lot now is that we have to join forces with sectional title, with the public sector, working with ward councillors to get things over the line. So, Abrie, I have engaged with you. I haven't forgotten you. I'm still going to reach out to you for some of my queries. But the question that I've got for today is, you know, sometimes we've got sewage issues that spill over into the streets and that kind of thing. So the question is, how do we make sure that it's 100% full body corporate or for council, and how do we work together to actually get the infrastructure sorted out and make sure we actually get the job done quickly and do what we need to from body corporate perspectives to make sure that we uphold our side of the bargain in terms of making sure the infrastructure is working properly from our side, so that there's no necessary spillage of sewage or water, or whatever, out into the streets. I know it's wishful thinking because of the failing government we've got in place, but certainly we can try and do what we can from our side. Your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for the comment. And of course, we all are faced with these issues. From my side, I think we must just understand that inside the complex, we have some control over it. Outside, we have no control except by encouraging people like the ward councillor to encourage the departments to spend the necessary money and do the necessary to do the maintenance. But what we can do is to ensure that our complex is legal and that we do not add to the burden of to the infrastructure by allowing, for instance, garages to be converted into living areas where you can now fit more people into it. We dealt with a complex in Bloemfontein where it was close to the university, and the garages was divided in up to 8 living sections where there was a bed. So they more than doubled the amount of people in the complex. And of course, the design of the sewage system and the stormwater and the parking was done for a specific amount of people that would make use of it. So I think the important part that we can play is to ensure that the amount of people in your complex stay the same, what it was designed for, and that we don't allow overcrowding, we don't allow rooms to be divided. We will have that already, where a bedroom is just converted into 2 bedrooms by putting in dry walling, and therefore you increase the amount of people that put pressure on the infrastructure. Just on that point, as far as the insurance is concerned as well, if that needs to go onto a building plan and the material that is used, for instance, the dry walling, should comply to fire regulations. Just putting in the normal dry wall with pine wood, if there's a fire again, the complex can cause problems as far as insurance is concerned. So yeah, to answer the question, what we can do is to ensure that the inside of the complex is complying to all rules and regulations. Outside, we have an uphill struggle, but we can do our part to make it better for council as well.
Thank you, Abrie. Andre, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Celinda. I just wanted to ask Abrie, when he froze for a minute, he was speaking about safety as far as safety vehicles are concerned, like fire trucks and ambulances. Where can one find those regulations? Because I'm living close to the gate of our main feeder road through the complex, but I'm particularly worried about elderly people living in the corner, and because of the parking situation, as you explained, there is not even enough space for a normal vehicle, a passenger vehicle, to pass through. Where does one get those regulations from?
Okay. Typically, a complex will have what we call a requirement for a site development plan. Now, a site development plan is a plan that is submitted before building plans, and on the site development plan, it will indicate the position of units, entrances, exits, the width of roads, and issues like that. So in that approval, council makes sure that there's enough moving space for those type of vehicles, and of course parking of vehicles outside of the designated parking areas will prevent the plan of working. So I'm sure there is rules and regulations. One can go to your council, to the traffic engineers department, and ask them for it. But that have already been checked when the plans was approved. So basically, we need to make sure that what was approved is adhered to. You can have 100 plans. If you allow vehicles to be parked anywhere, no plan is going to solve that problem. So, and again, the problem comes in that for the last 10, 15 years, that have been done that way. And now to tell owners, oh, you are not allowed to park here, of course, that is going to be problematic, but it needs to be done. And that's also, I think I would be interested in the reason why cars are parked there. Is it because people have converted their garages? Is it that they use it for storage? That is a big problem. So that needs to be solved, and that will then also solve the problem of parking everywhere. But you need to understand the reason for it. In the older complexes, sometimes the parking requirements was just not adequate for today's demands. And then one needs to look at a new parking layout that we do often for complexes to organize the additional parking that is required to make sure that you still can accommodate fire trucks and those things. So yeah. That's what where one would go, is to see what was approved and how it plays out in real life now.
Fantastic. Abrie, just a question from our side. We very often draft exclusive use area conduct and management rules, and we obviously don't offer the service of preparing that draft layout plan. Is that something that your officers do as well?
We do, yeah. We do quite a bit of the exclusive use area plans. That needs to be submitted with the rules, of course, and there's also a few tricky stuff over there that we might like to talk to you about. How do you deal with things in the rules? For instance, one of them that we have is where we would obviously use the existing garden wall as the boundary for the exclusive use. But now we have extension, a patio that was extended, and that roof will extend 30 centimeter over the wall. Now, you know, where do you go? Because if you only use the wall, that means the outside, once it needs to be painted, the owner is just going to say, oh no, this is not my exclusive use area. But again, you can also not use that line because it changed, you know, that's the odd thing. So we're not always sure how to deal with those. So we would like to get your opinion on that.
Definitely happy to assist you with that. So we, you know, we most often deal with exclusive use areas created in terms of the rules, and the rules generally are silent when it comes to where the responsibility starts and ends. And we do try in the rules that we draft to point that out. It's a lot easier when we find older sectional title schemes where they have registered exclusive use areas, and then that that the table on the relevant sheet actually explains where that's where the median line, for lack of a better word, actually is, but very often it doesn't. So it's definitely, I think that's a topic for a whole other webinar, or at least an article on its own, but I'll definitely correspond with you. The other question we often get asked working with conveyances, and because we're based in Cape Town, we generally work more with the guys in Cape Town than elsewhere. But do you work with conveyances in setting up sectional title schemes as well?
We do. We haven't done lots of those, but we do. Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
So you're welcome to ask us about it.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Abrie, I've shared your contact details as well as Jenny's. Jenny's online as well on the chat function. But before we go, because the Women in Sectional Title webinar will be starting in the next 5 minutes, and they've got a very interesting topic today where they're going to be discussing a couple of the CSOS adjudication orders. Just a note from our side. So we've shared on the chat function as well a couple of your previous webinars that we've either worked with together or you've worked with for us. But more importantly, we'd like to know how your trip was, because we were all taken with you on your excursion on Facebook and following those photographs as you were making your way around. But in 30 seconds, what was the highlights of your trip?
Well, I think any trip in that part of the world, of course, Machu Picchu is what it said it is. It is a World Heritage Site, not for nothing. It's really amazing. But for me, the highlight was the Amazon. I don't think, if you haven't been there, and we only been to a small part of it, we have any idea of the size and the impact. And it's really a wonderful part of the world to experience, anything from tropical to snow on the mountains to the highest, I think, that most people will ever go. I mean, we went up to about 5,000 meters above sea level, where you start shivering a bit because of the lack of oxygen. And it was an amazing, amazing trip, wonderful people. And yeah, I would recommend it to anybody to spread their wings and travel.
Fantastic. I know it was a trip that you were very much looking forward to. So I shared with you your excitement from the moment you went to the airport until the moment you came home. I'm very glad you came home safely. We most certainly missed you. And I was waiting for Jenny to give me a call to say, oh, Abrie got stuck somewhere. He decided to extend his holiday a little bit, but I'm very glad that you were able to join us today. Thank you so much. Ladies and gents, thank you very much for your time. Just a reminder that the copy of this recording, as well as Abrie's details, are going to be made available on our website in a couple of days from today. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you all again online for our webinar next month. Ladies and gents, have a fantastic day further. If we don't speak to you, have a good weekend as well. Keep well, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Zelinda.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.